Are you unsure about what medium to use with your gel press? Today I compared dye ink, acrylic paint, and pigment ink, and pair that with the Altenew Build-A-Flower Indian Lotus stamp set to create 4 very unique looking cards. Here's the Build-A-Flower Indian Lotus stamp set, which is of course a layering stamp set, but this video today is a good reminder that you can do so much more with these images than just layer the stamps like you see in the insert here. So I'm going to be using only one of the detail layers in all of the cards, and it's going to create some unique looks. Here I have a 5x7 gel press, and if you're not familiar with gel press techniques, I'll link another video in the top right hand corner that gives you some more information on those. I'm just peeling off the acetate backing and I'll adhere this to my glass mat. Our first gel press medium that we're going to use today is dye ink because most of us have that already. If you're making cards, if you're a stamper, then you probably have a whole bunch of dye inks on hand. Here I have Caribbean Sky, which is a cool blue, and I'm just adding that to the top of this. Now, one of the things that you're going to see with your dye inks is that the ink beads up on the surface of the gel press. It's a little bit like an oil and water type of situation. So the dye ink is water-based, and there must be kind of like an oil derivative of the gel press is all I can think of that makes it bead up like this. So I'm also inking up the Indian Lotus stamp set. You can see I picked out one of the detail layers, and I'm using 2 different colors. I'm using Rubellite and Razzleberry to just get some variation here. And you can see that it stamps lightly onto the gel press surface. I wanted some variation in color, so I'm coming in with Persian blue, which is a darker blue, and I'm just going to tap that around. I'm being careful to angle the pad so that I don't pick up all of the pink stamped flowers that I've put down. I had quite a few edges in the inking that I put down, so I'm just using a brayer to smooth out that ink, and I'll go ahead and do that at the top as well. Now with dye inks, the inks stay open for a very long period of time. In fact, I don't think that they'll dry on the gel surface. So you have a lot of time to work with this. They're not going to dry so fast that you have to work really quickly to get your paper down on your gel press. Here I'm using a premium copy paper, and I've just cut an 8.5 by 11 sheet in half. So I'm going to create another one. I liked how that turned out, but I wanted to have some darker blue. So I'm kicking it up with Sapphire ink, which is one of my darkest blues, and I just have a baby wipe here that I'm going to pick up some of the ink and also add some texture to this. I thought this would look nicer than running the brayer through it, so I just wanted to try a different textured look here. And I'll do the same thing. I'm going to ink up the Lotus with Rubellite and Razzleberry, and I'll stamp that on. Now, when you stamp onto the gel press that already has ink on it, it's going to pick up some of that ink. So if you don't want to contaminate your ink pad, go ahead and stamp that off on a scrap piece of paper on the side. I don't really get too concerned about that, but you certainly want to do that if you don't want to contaminate it. So here we have a darker color, and I'm loving the texture here. It almost reminds me of one of those vintage photo backdrop types of looks. And so I decided that I needed some darker lotus flowers, and so I'm just stamping it directly onto the print here. I wanted a little more color variation in the first print, so I'm going to add Sea Breeze to that print, and I'm just going to use a microfiber cloth to blot up some of the ink so that, again, there's some texture in this print. I'll go ahead and reprint that so you can do as many layers as you like. The dye ink is pretty transparent when you use it on a gel press, so you can keep layering the color. And you can see that when I used the brayer, it brought that pink up to the top as well, which is also a cool look. The second gel press medium for today is acrylic paint. And acrylic paint is going to give you a much more opaque color payoff. Super bright colors. You can see that it doesn't bead up on the surface of the gel press. Here you can see that I didn't clean my brayer in between the colors, and so the blue just overtook that phthalo green completely. You don't even see the phthalo green. So make sure that you clean your brayer, just roll it off on a piece of scratch paper in between. Now this paint has dried a little bit on the surface of the gel press, and so I'm doing a lift technique. I'm using the Indian Lotus stamp set to pull up that paint on the background here. And I was hoping I'd be able to stamp it onto that other panel, but because this is such a thin layer of paint, it dries so quickly. But don't worry, I'll show you how to clean your stamp. It's not going to affect your stamp at all. Here I'm adding Carmine so that we have contrasting color. And because the paint is dry and the majority of this brayer is dry, you can see that it's picking up some of the paint and giving it a distressed look around those lotus flowers. What's great about that is that more of this red color is going to show through. The more paint you pick up and create that distressed look, the more of the red is going to show through. So I'm going to clean off my brayer like I should have done earlier. And here I'm picking up the white, but because some of that brayer was dry, it picked up some of that blue paint. And we're going to see some of this white show through that blue as well. So that's something that I really like to do, is create that distressed look by picking up some of the first layer of the paint and replacing it with the second layer. So I've put my piece of paper down while the paint was still wet, and I'm just using a baby wipe to clean off my stamp. And that's really all I do. It really doesn't take a lot of effort to get your acrylic paint off, but it's not something that I would just let sit on your stamp for an extended period of time. Gently pull back your print, and it's just beautiful. I love all the distressed look of this. If you guys are learning something from this video and you're enjoying it, please give me a thumbs up and consider subscribing down below. At the end of the video, I'll go into all of the card making. I want to get all of the prints made first. So the next thing we're going to try, the third gel press medium, is pigment ink and metallic inks. So I'm going to start off with the Enchanted Gold pigment ink. So this is a metallic ink, and I have used and abused this ink pad. I have almost used all of the ink in this thing, and so I'm pressing pretty hard to get the ink out. I want to get as much of it out as I can on there. Here I have Ruby Red Mixed Media, and this is also a pigment ink, and I'm going to stamp up the Lotus stamp set with both the Ruby Red pigment ink and the Coral Berry. Now you're going to see a big difference when I stamp this on. The pigment inks are oil-based, I believe, and so they react differently to the gel press than the dye inks did. Again, with the dye inks, they're water-based, and so we had that kind of like oil and water effect going on, which led to some really beautiful texture on our print. The pigment inks are different. So we'll see this here. And if it's not pulling up all of your ink, go ahead and press it back down. Make sure you get it all pressed. And look how pretty that is. We're not done yet with this print though. I want to see a lot more gold on this. You can see how beautiful the gold is when you shift it in the light. So I put down another layer of gold over the entire thing, even over where the lotus flowers were. And you can see that I had kind of just a swipe from probably the edge of the stamp pad. So I'll just take the stamp pad directly to the paper and get a little more distressed look there. Look how gorgeous that is, you guys. So the lotus flowers look completely different with stamping with the pigment ink than they did with the dye inks. So at this point, I decided I needed gold on all of them. Like the gold was too pretty to not have on all of them. So I'm going to add it to all of the prints that we've done thus far. And you can see it just adds such a different dimension to this. To me, these prints almost look like washi tape, kind of like that painterly look washi tape. And look how pretty that is. So gorgeous. I love this Enchanted Gold. Okay, so let's get to the gel press card making. So what I find really fun about the gel press is you can create all of these different backgrounds, but a lot of times what I do is I do gel press with a purpose. I do it with the card design in mind. And in this case, I really did my stamping with the gel press. So the only thing I have left to do is cut them down to size if I want to do that. You can see that I tore the edges on this one because I felt like it was kind of like a little more artsy. I thought the torn edges would be cool. And I'll just add some sentiments. So these sentiments are all from the Indian Lotus stamp set. Now, if you follow me, you know that I don't like a black sentiment unless there's black elsewhere on the card. So I generally have to add some splatter. So I'll use the jet black ink spray, just tap the nozzle off in the bottle, then once in the trash can, and then bring it to your card. That'll help prevent like huge globs. And look how pretty that gold is. And I love how the pigment inks created this etched effect on the stamping. So cool. Now, if you have scraps like I did left over because I cut these down, use those for your sentiment strip. It's a little more artsy and adds more texture and interest than just a regular white or black sentiment strip. So in one of my previous videos, I said I really struggle with wonky sentiments, but based on what the sentiment says, I decided it needed to be wonky. So let's do a flip through of the card so that you can see the gold kind of shining in the light. It's really hard to capture that in some of the photos, so I wanted to make sure I show it here, but I'll also show you some close-ups so that you can see the texture and how the texture differs from one card to the next or one medium to the next more specifically. I love that gold, you guys. It's amazing. And this is my favorite card because I think it's just so artsy and I love that sentiment and the colors. I really love the colors on this one. Let me know your favorite in the comments down below, and definitely let me know if you've had a gel press and you've held off using it, whether or not seeing a comparison of the different mediums that you can use, these 3 different mediums, dye ink, acrylic paint, pigment ink, has helped you and inspired you to pull out your gel press and get creative. Thanks so much for joining me today, and I'll see you soon with more inspiration.